take great pleasure in welcoming Anand Vardhan. And I have already briefed you about Anand and an exceptional student and especially source of inspiration for his efforts. So I think all of you please be seated. Fine. And thank you, Anand, for sharing your time amidst your extremely busy schedule. So presently, Anand is posted as a Chief Development Officer in Muradabad and has held a lot of responsible positions. A brief introduction, he has been from mechanical engineering and he has secured 7th rank in 2016 and his score in political science was 302 marks and earlier he was giving through PABAD, but through political science he could get this rank. And he always had exceptionally good marks in general studies. So primarily I have invited Anand for 2-3 reasons. As you know, the interview programs are going on and many students do not have a very clear perspective about what exactly the interview. I have found many are still studying from the books and textbooks, whereas it is all about personality. Another thing is the mains examination, the prelims examination, each segment of the examination, it has its own special requirements and how these things have to be handled. And most importantly, sharing your personal experience about the preparation strategy and what is your perspective about the exam. So before it's just formal welcome to Anand. So now I will request Anand to share and you can just let us know like what would you like to interact with the students. Some are online also. Okay. Whatever is comfortable is fine.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible to everyone? So, good afternoon, all of you. How are all of you today? Very happy and bright faces I'm seeing after a long time, and I thank ma'am for this opportunity that I have now gotten to interact with all of you after such a long time, because after going into the district, I have not had the chance to come and meet a lot of aspirants. So it's actually very good to see all of you. Ma'am has already given a very small introduction, and what I'll like to do is try and understand कि among you the people जो यहाँ पे हैं उनका preparation level is where, and so that I can probably arrange my speech in a better manner and it can be more useful to you. So I just want to understand, are there any people who are taking the interview this time, who are giving the interview this time? Okay. And any of you have appeared in interview before also? You have already appeared? Have you been allocated a service also? Okay. So you have appeared once in the interview before. Okay. And how many of you have not taken the exam even once as of now? Majority of you. Okay, great. Okay. So what I'll try to do is progress step by step and try to take you through the entire preparation journey that I had. And for me, it was a pretty long one. So I have certain pearls of wisdom for you. And post that, it has now been 5 years in service also. So from the inside, you get a view of what is to be expected and what are people expecting when you are sitting in the interview board also. So from the mindset of the bureaucrat, how things look and what kind of future bureaucrats would you want in case you were on a recruiting panel. So I'll share those experiences with you. So to begin with, since most of you will take your first attempt in the near future, prelims preparation के बारे में सबसे पहले I'll talk. Are all of you comfortable in English, or anyone who's not comfortable in English? Okay, great. So I'll talk about prelims first. how to start this preparation. So when I started, I took my first attempt in 2013. That was CSE 2013. And that time around, there was CSAT, of course. So for 2 years, in the 13 and 14. So this is, as ma'am mentioned, for the initial 3 attempts, I had public administration as my optional. In my third attempt, I had reached the interview. In the first 2 attempts, I had cleared prelims, reached mains, but didn't clear mains. Third May, I reached the interview. So it is a progressive steps for me. And in the fourth attempt, I got a top 10 rank. So this progression has happened in spite of the repeated mistakes that I did and in spite of some corrections that I did. So prelims ke liye, I have been in that side where CSAT was also counted initially, and uske baad we came to the era when only paper 1 was counted. So जो मैंने pattern देखा है, the pattern that I've observed even after 2016, because trust me, even when you do clear the exam and come into the service, the curiosity of looking at the prelims paper or the final result does not lessen. You still do it with as much enthusiasm. So we keep looking at the pattern of the questions being asked. And in my opinion, in the past 4 or 5 years at least, like after 2016, if you look at the paper 1 in GS, there are a lot of random questions. There are a lot of questions which you would not expect, especially in the history section, where it's very difficult to know that for a fact. A lot of them are factual questions. I think that till 2016, there were certain questions that could have been worked out with some logic and interpretation, and you can figure out some elimination methods. But after that, it has really become very, very difficult, because I know people who were clearing the exam and who had reached interview with me, but after that failed to clear prelims for the next 2 or 3 years, like post 2017. So of course, it has become a bit of a problem, because no matter how well you prepare, on the given day, if you get one question wrong, let's say a very simple question wrong, because the margin for error is very less, and most people who miss in the prelim stage, they miss by a very small margin. And the cutoffs are also in points, as you all know. So basically, the strategy to minimize this has to be adopted now, because CSAT is not there to rescue you in your total score. So when I took the exam in 13 and 14, I comfortably cleared the prelims exam. And in 15, I don't remember my exact score, but I think managed to clear it by 4 or 5 marks, I think. And in the attempt that I finally cleared the exam, I was a little more comfortable. I think I scored 130 or something when the cutoff was 116. So that was my attempt in which I finally cleared the exam. So how to go about it, since all of you are just beginning preparation? What I would like to say is, what has changed in the last 4 or 5 years, apart from this paper 1, is knowledge overload, data overload also. So in our time, I don't think that we had online resources to the tune that we have today. So now every website that we knew back then has expanded and put up even more material and innovated in their methods of teaching and everything. So today you'll find so much material everywhere that it's very difficult to filter and figure out what to read. So I think the first step in your preparation, which all of you would already have crossed by now, is figuring out your resources. And as you would have seen in a lot of toppers talks that you might have attended, people always tell you to, first of all, plan out and minimize your resources, like at least fix your resources. For example, in geography, if somebody tells me that NCRTs and GC Leong पढ़ लिया है, now what else to go for? So it's very difficult to believe that you have read both those books and understood, and any question that comes out of those books, you will be able to answer. That will not happen. So in prelims exam, like I said, the parts which you know are in the syllabus, the questions which you know are in your orbit somewhere in your solar system, not outside it. If you get those questions wrong, it becomes very difficult to score, because the rest of the questions are so difficult that no one gets them right. Hardly anyone would know about them. Maybe some lucky guesswork or elimination can help. But otherwise, the questions that you do know, especially, see, you know that the weightage of geography and environment is already very high in prelims. So if you get those questions right, polity questions right, then at least you can be assured that those things are working for you. because otherwise you'll again struggle for that one question, 1 mark, and your entire year would go to waste. So fixing your resources. Next is what I've realized now coming into service also and post this, uh, you have to have a timetable. You have to have a schedule apart from the time that you're spending in your coaching, taking guidance, and for example, writing test series. You got to have sufficient time for self-study, and it has to be nothing less than 6 hours. So nothing less than 6 hours works. I know a lot of people shy away from giving a number that how many hours you should study. But I sincerely feel that anything less than 6 hours will not work because of the level of the exam in the current scenario, the level of competition because seats are also decreasing. So another factor after 2017 has been that also, that the number of people qualifying for interview, for example, in 2016 when we went to interview, I think 2900 odd students, 2960 or something, went to the interview. But this result, for example, this year, 1800 something, I think, 1820 people or something have cleared for the interview. So it's a huge difference. These 1200 people, this is a huge difference. Even the number of posts, there could be 100 or 200 lesser posts, but this makes a huge difference and creates competition which is very difficult to stand out. Like why I asked you about whether you've cleared the exam before, or because there are people who have been allocated service and who are taking the exam with you, and interview may the number of people qualifying, a lot of them would already be in service. A lot of them would already be in service. So that is that reduces their pressure. It enhances their chances also. So that's the truth, basically. So you have to understand that competition is tough. So no laxity can actually help you. In the prelims, after completing the sources that I mentioned, the most important other factor, which again all of you already know, is current affairs and newspaper. Current affairs also you can have plenty of supplements where you can see monthly magazine or a booklet, but nothing substitutes the newspaper, as you would all have heard multiple times. So I would like to reiterate it because newspaper is something. Recently, I'll tell you, a week ago, I downloaded the Hindu newspaper and I went through it. And it was such a familiar feeling and so nice because I've not read it for the last 2-3 years. And it just reduces your IQ if you don't read the newspaper. So just try doing that and try doing that regularly. It is not only for now. Even later, you need to know a lot of things in detail and a lot of their aspects. Otherwise, your IQ level will go down. Your ability to form an opinion would also suffer if you don't read the newspaper. So make it a point, and then again, how to integrate it into your preparation. I'll talk about that when we come to the mains portion also. If you cannot recall what you have studied and not reproduce it in the exam, it's all waste. So whatever you are reading, don't do it as a hobby, do it as a method. Like you have to invest your time in the things that will actually help you in the exam. Otherwise, like for example, Yojana or Kurukshetra, I'll just give you a very small example. For example, a Yojana or a Kurukshetra magazine might have a certain theme, let's say women empowerment. So there would be at least 5 to 10 articles about women empowerment in that entire magazine. Now, are you willing to invest all of this time on one topic, from which probably one question will come somewhere in GS 2 or 3? Only one question will come. You will have only 12 minutes to write that answer. So do you need to like read 10 articles to get to that point where especially it's a very generalized topic and the questions in mains are never very, very specific or very, very fact based. So you have to understand where you are investing your time and what is the ultimate output. The output is your mains answer sheet. Of course, the prelims first you have to clear, but the main output is your mains answer sheet. So anything that is not going to help you, you have to eliminate that. And you have to do it at the beginning. Otherwise, things will, I'll share a very, when I started preparing in the first attempt in 2013 when I took it. So that time around, I was going through this PIB website. That time we didn't have ready-made printed notes of that. So I used to look at the website, make notes of it. It was a very, very time-consuming process. Of course, it enhanced my knowledge a lot, but it didn't have the cost-benefit ratio. So in the mains, when very basic questions I had to write, I started suffering because I had invested so much time in reading PIB, because it's very difficult to go through press releases of each ministry of each day. That's a lot, and especially if you're doing it online. So that was a wasteful investment, and then later I switched away from it. However, I had those notes, and when I finally appeared, I had revised everything I had ever read in the last 4 years. So my point is that wherever you are investing your time and energy, make sure that you have it available in your recallable memory in the exam. Otherwise, it will all go to waste. When prelims mock tests are talked about, you have to be very, very careful when taking the prelims exam. Just do not, in the current scenario at least, you cannot afford to take the exam without taking plenty and plenty of mocks, and try to get it from as many sources as possible, and try to revise those mocks as many times as you can. Like people here who have now reached the interview would tell you, there is no shortcut for this. Even when you think you know the answer, things will slip in your memory. Even when you have seen ki, this question I got wrong, the correct answer was not A but B, but it will slip your memory if you do not revise that paper again. So taking mocks is one part of it. Of course, see, time management will not be a great issue in the exam, at least in the prelims paper 1. So time management is not an issue. CSAT, they are increasingly making it difficult to manage the time there. But paper 1, still time management is not an issue. So you really have to work about the knowledge part of it and the practice part of it. And why mocks are important is you get a general idea of things. First of all, your base of knowledge increases, the kind of questions that you cover increases, and the chances of the same kind of question being asked in the exam is also there to some extent, because ultimately they have to frame a question from the syllabus. They cannot go completely outside it, and all the questions cannot be completely outside it. A lot of it has to be from within the syllabus, and you have to just get those right. You don't have to get all 100 questions right. You just have to clear the prelims exam. Even those marks are not counted in the final assessment, as you know. For the mocks, I would suggest that at least 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months before the prelims, you have to start taking the mocks and increase the frequency as you near your prelims paper. And once you are able to do that, and of course, this is predicated on the fact that you have already completed your syllabus 3 months before the prelims. And for that, at least I think for a general GS program that all of you would be attending, around probably 8 to 9 months are allocated for that overall tayari of the entire GS portion of the prelims exam. So my 2 cents to you would be that just go for the basic things. Do not overload yourself with a lot of material. Just try finishing the basic reading material that you have in front of you for different subjects, and then go for mocks, as many mocks as possible. Now, there is another aspect to this when we talk about mains exam also. Whether the preparation for mains exam is completely different from prelims, or you start preparing for mains only and prelims automatically get sorted. So the answer to that question is, of course, it's an integrated exam. The purpose is not to clear the prelims exam. The purpose is to clear the exam. So overall, for an initial stage, you cannot practice answer writing unless you have covered some part of your syllabus. So try to read it from that perspective. When you're reading Lakshmikant, for example, in polity, I'll tell you, when you're reading Lakshmikant, you are getting the basic facts of everything. And when you're reading the newspaper, you are becoming apprised of the current happenings. And when you're writing the answer, then in the mains exam, when you're writing the answer, you have to kind of integrate both of these things and use your knowledge from GS2, which is the framework knowledge of the constitution and basic acts and rules, and then apply it to the current scenario. Most of the questions will be from, let's say, out of 20, at least 12 questions have a inclination towards a current based event or something that's important going on. So you have to ultimately think about writing the mains exam. Prelims, like I said, the mocks assessment, another thing which all of you must take care about is the kind of hit rate, so to say, number of questions you're getting right. So again, there are many strategies to this extent that you have to attempt. Some people say that you attempt a lot of questions, and then even if you get 70% right, you get somewhere outside of the danger zone of near the cutoff. But some people would be a little more conservative. So I was in the second category. I have attempted in my 4 attempts, maximum 77 questions. And I've cleared all the prelims with CSAT, without CSAT, whatever. So 77 questions was my maximum that I've attempted, because there are at least 20 to 25 questions which are very, very difficult to solve. And matlab, you definitely not know the answer definitively. You might know one part of it, half of it, but you would not know the answer definitely no matter how much you study. So, of course, these questions are deliberately put in because otherwise the difficulty level of the exam reduces. So, from a paper setter's point of view, you have to understand that as soon as the cutoff rises, if you see the trend of the last 10 years, as soon as the cutoff rises, they set a very, very tough paper so that it drops somewhere near 100. I don't know what was the cutoff last time, if anyone. 92. So imagine from 2016, where it was 116, it has reached 92. So they kind of keep doing this course correction so that you come back to the mean, you come back near 100 somewhere. So it'll never go beyond that usually. So they are sort of compelled to put those questions which are just unsolvable. So don't worry about those questions. As I said, that majority of the difference that is that you're going to make is from the paper, the questions everyone knows. And if you get those wrong, then you'll be in trouble. So prelims is somewhere, of course, a matter of luck also on a given day. At least now I can say that with certainty that people who are very well prepared also might not be able to clear prelims. But why I'm telling you this is, if you fail to clear prelims, for example, and you don't have to go into that self-pity and wallowing, because ultimately it is also there's certain factors outside your control. There are certain ways in which your mind works on a given day. When you look at a question, there are certain things that you think of on a given day. Like I remember in the attempt that I cleared the exam in 2016, 77 questions I had attempted, and I got 7 or 8 questions wrong. And one of the questions was an absolute sitter question. It was the easiest question of the paper, a polity question, I think. And I don't remember the exact question, but it was the easiest question, and I got it wrong. So once you can avoid that to some extent, then you can be assured of getting clear. And this is important because unless you know, see, if you think that you're on the borderline, then you'll not prepare for mains that well also. You'll keep waiting for the result and waste that kind of time also. So basically, you have to be in a very, very safe zone to prepare peacefully for mains. Otherwise, something or the other will keep cropping up in your head. You'll think that let the result come and then let me start preparing for mains. Now, mains exam mein, overall, coming to that part, and then I'll also take your questions, any specific ones that you might have. See, mains exam mein, overall, the knowledge base that is tested is extensive. And anyone who has cleared the mains exam, in my opinion, has basically cleared the paper. After that, it's also, again, a lot of luck also. And on a given day, how your interview goes, how your total is made, and all of that. So the mains exam, if you are able to do well over a period of whatever 1 week and 9 papers, the most elemental aspect of mains exam is writing. So of course the quality of your answers has to be good, and your content has to be good. But overall you have to write fast, you have to write a lot, and you have to write well. Like it should look good also, because that is the core of it, which I think is a little less talked about. Unless you have sufficient speed, sufficiently legible and good handwriting, and that kind of speed you cannot achieve in a normal manner. For example, I'll give you my own experience with the mains exam. From the strategy part is apart from this. In the first 2 mains exam, I didn't write a single mock. I had a good command over language. I thought I could write well. Essay I never had to prepare. GS4 I never paid much attention to. And I wrote the first 2 mains exam without writing a single mock. And I was in the first mains, I was away from the cutoff by 40 marks or something. In the next one, I narrowed the gap, but I was still away from the cutoff by 20 marks. So, unless you do write, so the mains exam is not meant for somebody who does not have a habit of writing. When you take the exam for the first time, those of you who have never taken the mains exam, only taking the exam completely in a week is a very exhausting exercise. When I wrote my first exam in 2013, and that year was the one in which they started giving out 25 questions. Before that, that was not the pattern. So 25 questions in each GS paper and all of that. So that was very difficult to manage in 3 hours. And so once I wrote that exam for a week, well, I was happy that I just wrote it, so it was so difficult to just achieve that week overall. And when I wrote it the next time, I was a little better off because, of course, I had written it once, so I had some idea of what is going on. So in the third attempt, when I thought that things were not working, and then I took some guidance for the mains, and then I wrote some test series also. When I started writing the test series, I realized that there are certain areas that I have to really improve upon. One being my speed, one being the fact that it's a limited space answer sheet. So it's already fixed where maximum हम कितना कंटेंट उसमें डाल सकते हैं subject to of course your handwriting constraints, and somebody writes a little bigger and other people have a smaller handwriting, but ultimately you have a set fixed space where you have to fit your answer. So initially what I was doing is, and again this is very very like frugal knowledge I am giving you. For example, for a 12.5 mark answer, there are 2 A4 sheets allocated to you in the answer sheet. Initially, I was writing 1.5, and I thought it was enough, and I would, sort of maintain this consistency. Again, I'm not talking about filling the answer sheet, but there has to be enough content. It cannot go on like, and believe you me, in 2016, when I finally did clear the exam, all of the 9 papers, 3 hours each. So let's exclude the Hindi and English part of the non-qualifying ones. 7 papers, let's say 3 hours each. For 21 hours, I was only writing. And I was writing at a breakneck speed. It was not humanly possible to write faster than that and be legible. That's what I did in 2016 when I did clear the exam. So this part you have to take care of, because once you do everything that there can be done, there's nothing more to be done, right? So of course, there has to be content that has to come from your preparation. The bedrock of how fast you can think and how fast you can write has to be your preparation. But you cannot achieve that without that physical work and that physical practice. So try taking mocks, as many as you can. When I joined Shubhra Ranjan ma'am's political science classes, like she's a magician in the way, I took my fall science subject in July and cleared the exam in November. And so that was like 3 months, and I used to take regular classes and also joined her test series. So when I used to write test series in my final attempt, the paper that she had given us, of course it was for a couple of chapters. Initially there were part papers and then there were full papers. So I used to keep a target of 2.5 hours for each paper and attempting all the questions. Like in the optional you have to attempt 5. So that part I used to keep as 2.5 hours. I used to finish the paper in 2.5 hours, and I took the entire test series like that. When I went to the actual exam, I was writing with the same speed, but because it was the mains exam, I took 3 hours to write the same papers. So you have to keep that kind of gap, and if you have that practice of just looking at a question, and so imagine like mechanically, agar thoda sa you want to visualize it. Imagine that you have a web of knowledge in your head, and you see a question about food processing. So the way this works is, that's what I'm trying to tell you. The people who do clear this mains exam are the ones who can do this, what I'm going to say. Once you look at food processing, that word, you have a web of knowledge in your head. You can pluck at will from everywhere. You don't have to think for a second what you have to write for food processing. You start the moment the clock starts, and you use all the space that you have, write very very quality content. You connect it with 3 or 4 more sectors and write a very very balanced answer. Only these people will be able to clear the exam, because everyone knows about food processing. How would you stand out from so many others who are writing the mains exam? Unless you have that delta, whether it is speed or content, how will you ever clear the exam? So that was the bottleneck in the initial 2 attempts, which I figured out, that you have to write more You have to think more, connect more. There has to be more content. You cannot be happy with writing some basic stuff and be done with it. You cannot be, because then you'll get basic marks, everyone will get basic marks, and you'll not clear the exam. So mains exam mein, the writing speed part is very, very important. And I'll urge all of you to follow this method whenever you're writing the mocks, both for GS and optional. Just, keep a clock for lesser time, maybe 2.5 hours, 2:45, whatever, and do it according to that, so that you can achieve that speed in the mains exam, because it is intrinsically a pressure environment, and you'll intrinsically slow down without realizing it, because there will be additional pressure on you and sometimes you'll just look at the question and spend a minute appreciating it. Yaar, itna acha question pucha hai. So that also happens, because once you've read enough and you've seen a lot of questions and you see a question in UPSC, sometimes you spend some time appreciating it also. So that happens. So basically, you have to account for all of that and be very, very fast in writing the mains exam. As far as the content is concerned, see, it's something that develops over time and you have to be patient with it. So the people who are preparing now, if you start answer writing after 2 months or 3 months, you will not achieve the same results that you would probably after 8 or 9 months, because some things just take time. So I believe that there's no shortcut to achieving that sort of maturity in writing an answer. And same goes for the interview. And then later on in service also, you see that the people who enter in the first year, they're very different from people in the fifth year, because that maturity, it has to come with age. You cannot be taught everything in a day. So similarly, what to read from a newspaper, how to extract it in the exam in the best possible manner, in the shortest possible time, in the best possible handwriting, that comes over time. So, but do not, think that it's a mountain that you can't climb. You have to start somewhere, and once you start writing the initial mock tests, then you'll see that you'll get some feedback from your teachers and your seniors who are checking your papers. And then what you can do is sort of take that feedback and incorporate it in your next exam that you take, and slowly over time just challenge yourself, right? Even let's say a test series of 10 or 12 papers, in the initial couple of papers, if you are writing at a certain speed and pace, try and better that pace in the fourth paper, fifth paper. So slowly, unless you get better over time, it is going to be very, very difficult to clear the mains exam, because I failed at that hurdle twice, and I feel that it is in fact the most difficult one. So clearing the mains is not easy, and anyone who's cleared it, like I said, is pretty much in the green in terms of his strategy and his eligibility to get into the civil services. Now, talking about the interview part, I'll take again more specific questions about the mains from you. Well, interview, I have not been personally very, very successful in the interview. I took 2 interviews. In the first interview, I think that I had Chhatar Singh Board in the first interview. Now he's no longer there in UPSC. So during that time, when I entered the exam, so when I entered the board, you take a lot of mocks, you do a lot of preparation, but it's about everything falling in the face of bad luck also, and probably just a bad day. So once I entered the interview room, I thought that I would wish everyone and sit down and whatever. They'll tell me to sit down. So I was still standing, and they said that, do you know what's a cryogenic engine? And I was not, like, I was about to wish them. And they asked me that. So then probably some other member realized that I was still standing. So they said, okay, you can take a seat. And then he asked me the same question. So this is where my interview started, because I was a mechanical engineer. I had written in my DAF that my father is in the defense forces, and Air Force mentioned tha usme. So, they started off with this. So I somehow, it was a very, very off track question, and I hadn't prepared for it, obviously, but I somehow managed an answer. And then they asked me that what fuel is used in the cryogenic engines. And then I just blanked out because and then, from that point onwards, this was the beginning of the interview. It, of course, lessened my confidence in everything. But from that point onwards, it was a horror story. The first interview was a complete horror story for me. After that, they started asking me about nuclear submarines, defense procurement policy, which I answered. A few of these I answered, like I valiantly fought, But when the final results came out, I scored 138 marks in the interview. And overall, also in the mains, I had just cleared by 10 or 15 marks. So anyway, I was not going to make it comfortably. So I didn't make it to the final list. Now, here I want to talk about this aspect also, the failure aspect of it and how you have to recover from there, because that is something that a lot of us face. And not just because we are not capable enough of clearing the exam, because the exam is intrinsically designed in such a manner that it is so difficult and there are just so limited number of seats. For example, there are 180 seats in the IAS, and like if you belong to any of the categories, and you look at that category in particular, for example, unreserved category, now with EWS is what, 72 seats, I think, 72 seats. And in those 72, for example, you have to get a rank of this 72 to get into the IAS. Now, if you score a rank of 50, then you don't get your cadre. So because of the intrinsic difficulty in this numerical difficulty of accommodating everyone who's good enough to serve as a civil servant, this becomes very tough. So the difficulty level is not about how difficult the questions are cognitively or how intelligent you have to be to answer those questions. Difficulty arises from the very, very narrow output of this entire machinery. This is a very, very narrow output, and very few people would eventually make it, no matter how good people are. So, probably most of you are going to face failure at some point in this exam. How to recover from it is again, not a strategy that is general and can be the same for everyone. It has to depend on your situation, where you are. For example, if you are just in your final year, you took your first attempt, didn't clear, you have plenty of time. You don't have to really think and work on your mistakes and take the exam the next year. But again, if it's your fourth attempt and you've not been working for the last 4 years, and after your graduation you've not been working, it's a completely different story. And depending on your family background and your situation and your age and everything, so you have to kind of keep all those factors in mind. So I'll tell you how I managed and minimized the risk, so to say, or diversified the risk in this entire process. At no point in the civil services preparation was I stranded for a job. When I left college in 2013, my initial 2 attempts, I was working. I was working in the private sector. I took the exam while working, like along with my job. And therefore, somehow I was not able to devote a lot of time and didn't clear the mains in the first 2 attempts. After that, I realized that now I've worked for 2 years in the private sector. I've taken 2 attempts. I have a bit of idea about this exam. And I like studying for it. And there's still plenty of time. So let me take a break. Take a break for a year, year and a half. And then if things don't work out, I will come back to the private sector. That was my plan. That's what I did. I quit my job in 2015. I came to Karol Bagh. I stayed here for a year, year and a half. Then I took my third attempt. That was my third attempt. I reached the interview, but didn't clear, like I said, because of a bad interview and not so great marks in mains. Now, this was June 16, I think, May or June 16. And now I've been jobless for a year and a half. And in my third attempt after reaching the interview, it's a very, very painful situation. So when you don't clear the prelims, it's still better. But if you don't clear the interview, it's a little more problematic because you have to go through the prelims again. And that's sort of insulting also because you have to go through the entire process again and start from scratch. So at that point, that one day I did not decide. So what I'll advise you that whenever you are in a lot of grief and sadness and pain, do not take big decisions on that day. Just let it slide for a day or two, grieve over it, and it's only human to cope with failure that way. And that's what I did. I remember about this 2016 result, like CSE 15 result, when I didn't clear the interview. I didn't know what to do. So at that point, that was not an option in my head because I had reached the interview after 3 years and I had high hopes of clearing the exam. I had prepared very well. And I was just not ready for it. And when I saw the list, I didn't control F because I was very scared of that. I read the entire list, but didn't find my name. And after that, I was very, very blank. After that, I didn't know what to do. But then I just took a day. I thought about what had gone wrong. And this is a funny story, but I have to tell you this. I went to CP and it's a circle, right? In a circle. So I probably took 50 rounds of that circle, just walking. I didn't think of anything. I just, let my thoughts be with me and not make any conclusions. The very same day that the result had come, and one of my relatives called me that I think that year Tina ma'am had cleared the exam. So he said, देखो 22 years की she cleared the exam and first attempt था तुम तो 3 साल से लगे हो ठीक है. So they're always there to make you feel better. So that is also a part of life. So I did nothing. I just stayed with all of these thoughts. I took at least, like I said, 50 rounds, and then I came back and. I had a room partner also who had also not cleared with me in the interview. So at least we were on the same page there. So, so I told him that I'm changing my optional and I'll take physics. So he was like, again, it's 3 years of pub ad and then physics with so little time. But I said, nahi, I've decided and I'll take physics. And this is like, I'll fail again, but I'll not fail with pub ad because this is just too much. I'm not scoring more than 200 marks in pub ad, and I have to just get out of the situation. I'll just take anything else. I'll take a science subject. I'll read physics. I'll join a coaching. I'll do that. So actually went to the market and bought a book of electrodynamics or something. I don't know what it was. So once I got that book, I just bought it, and then I started reading that book. And this is so that was a year when we still had some time to fill the form for the next prelims. There was, I think, a 15-day gap or something when you could fill for the prelims. So I started reading physics, and in 2 days I realized it was not a great decision to start reading physics because the things that I knew were very simple and the things that were there in that textbook, and that was just one chapter. So I thought that this will be a little difficult to manage. Then I opened the UPSC website. I went to the apply for the prelims thing. I filled Pol Science and I submitted my application for the prelims exam. And I had spoken to ma'am before that. Just a day before that, I had spoken to ma'am. I asked her that, ma'am, this is the situation and I want to take Pol Science. And like I have to take the exam this year only. So will it be possible to prepare in this? And when is your batch starting and all of that? I asked her. And she told me that you can go through the study material till the time the batch, I think it was starting in July that year. So she said that, you can come and take the study material and at least get a basic idea because you had PubAd. So you would have some basic knowledge of Pol Science. So now everyone around me, because we had a group of college friends who was preparing with me also. So when I started the coaching in July, so I used to come in the morning, I think 8 a.m. class, ma'am, I used to come in the morning. So at that time, I some days I missed the class also. I couldn't get up, and sometimes my schedule was not up to the mark, so I missed. So the people around me used to joke that you directly like write the exam in Pol Science. You'll not take a test series. मतलब कुछ भी नहीं किया है. अचानक से you've taken an optional. You directly write the exam. But I knew that something was not working out for me, and at this point, I decided that I'll write the mains and then I'll go back to the private sector because this was my 4th attempt. I have already had a gap of 1.5 years, and it is not prudent to write the mains and wait for the result and get a negative result again. And then my achanak se 4th attempt will be over. It almost felt like that. So after writing the mains exam that year, I went back and joined another job. And this is January 17, when I went to Gurgaon. I shifted my belongings and everything, and I cleared the mains exam. I got an interview call. Then I took some leave from my office and prepared for the interview because I knew that somewhere the reliability of clearing this exam is suspect. It's highly suspect. So you have to have some sort of a plan in your head. Of course, you can. There's a plenty amount of time that you can have. Like right after your graduation, you can take a break. Couple of years after your graduation. So the more time you spend, the more difficult it gets. So you have to plan it in the manner which is best suited to you and does not render you absolutely useless for the rest of your life. Like I'm talking in very, very practical terms, because what happens is, for example, if you have spent 6 years in preparation right after your graduation and not cleared the exam, it becomes very, very difficult to go back even to the private sector, Government sector, again, you have to go through the exams only, and just in case things don't work out. So have a plan in your head. Know your strengths, know what works for you, what doesn't. I'll take. Know what works for you and doesn't, and therefore then you can be a little sure of where you're going. You can have a little bit of less pressure in your own head. You'll not have less pressure from parents and relatives, all of that will be there, but at least in your own head you'll know that, okay, if this doesn't work out, I have this backup, I have this sort of a plan in my head. Now coming back to the interview, I'll just spend 5 minutes with that, and then I'll take your questions also. Now the interview board, what they expect from you is maturity, number one. Maturity and balance, number two. What I have realized in my 2 interviews is they're not looking for extreme views. On any topic, you might have extreme views, like personally, but as an officer, you cannot go ahead and express them. And you are expected to have that sort of a diplomatic response to things which are difficult to answer. There are always things like, I'm pretty sure you can pose questions to me which are very difficult to answer, but I promise you I'll answer you very well because I'll be diplomatic, right? So you have to have balance. When you know it's difficult to take a side on Ukraine, you abstain from voting, right? That's what is the method of government. Because there are so many stakeholders in government, it's impossible to satisfy everyone. But then you go, the public policy that is made, it's mostly for public. It looks at what is overall beneficial for the public, right? So when you are aspiring to be a government servant, first and foremost, you should have the capability to defend the government. You might disagree with their policy also, but in your role, you will have to defend that policy. And that's your job. So, and there's no contradiction here, by the way. A lot of people ask me about political interference and everything, like on the job. Now you have to understand that this is not a contradiction. You are in a democracy. You're not in a setup where bureaucracy is the supreme authority. You are in a democracy, ultimately. It's the legislators who are making the laws for us. We are only the executive part of government. And we are responsible to the people through them, right? And they represent the wishes of the people. So, for example, on this part where, I answer how you deal with politicians and what kind of pressures you face in the field, they are one of the stakeholders, right? So, they, whenever they come to you and they express something, it might be the wishes of the people of their particular constituency and electorate. I'm not saying that you have to bend it to that will, but you have to be responsive to that will. That is what it is about. You cannot be unresponsive to it. You cannot prima facie assume that just because he is a public representative, he is asking something wrong, right? So that is what is expected. This level of maturity is expected from you, that you have to understand where you are going, understand your role. Your role is coordination. Your role is, of course, leadership in the district, but your main role is coordination. You have officers for everything. Like, for example, I'm Chief Development Officer currently. You have officers for everything in the district, from Sichai to Udyan to Pashupalan. We have specialist officers for everything. But still the IAS is needed because you are in a coordinating role. You provide leadership, you provide direction, and anything that you decide for the district, the forces that you have, you can bring them together. So that is the entire purpose of it. So in the interview board, you have to appear balanced, even if you're not inside. Maybe if you're very twisted also inside, you have to appear very, very balanced. On certain aspects, you will be asked questions. Definitely, there will be some situation-based questions. Definitely, there will be some questions that will be very hard to answer and take a stand. But, that is the real test of things to come. And when we talk about the DAF and the factual questions that are asked in the interview, see, they have to be there. Ultimately, a 30-minute session, they have to find some content. So therefore, there's a DAF. And, there's some sort of basis to get along your background and your previous job and your graduation. So there is that basis. Of course, you'll prepare your DAF in the most complete manner possible, because any third person who looks at the DAF, he might think of this question. You sort of make a list of those questions and prepare your hometown, your job, and all of that, right? So that is a given. But that is just a conversation starter. That's just the framework of the entire interview. That is not very, very relevant. Now, when they ask about a current issue, for example, a very burning issue that's been in the news, and you refuse to answer, that's very negative again. Because you're not expected to be somebody who is out of touch with reality. You cannot not know something very, very major. Again, even as a graduation subject, a lot of people think that it's been 4 years. So, like I said, when I appeared, it was a totally technical interview in my third attempt. So, it was about combined gas cycles and whatnot, right? And I was so bad at thermodynamics, I can't tell you. So, ultimately, you have to know that in your graduation subject, for example, you need to know the basic things. For example, how many of you are from the engineering background here? Okay. And medical background? All right. So, the basic aspects of your job you have to know. Like as a mechanical engineer, you should know what is an internal combustion engine. As an electrical engineer, you should know what kind of a motor is there in a fan, how a tube light works, how a oven works. All of these things are very, very basic. So, you have to focus more on the everyday rather than on the detail. Because once you are not able to answer those questions, then it leaves a very, very bad impression that you don't know the subject at all. So it's possible that you do not remember a very, very specific formula or a thing, but it's not at all acceptable that you do not know anything about the subject or the way very simple things work. So that part you have to take care of in the interview. Also, when the interview board you're facing, there will be moments when there will be a string of questions you'll not be able to answer. There always would be some sort of moments like that. And then there are moments when you'll realize that you've said something wrong, or they've corrected you, and that's something that you should have said. Like, I'll give you a very small example. In the 16 interview, in which I scored 168 marks, by the way, next year, which was again a very average score, but I had a good interview. So there I was asked about being the housing secretary of a state and then asked to implement a low cost housing scheme for a particular district. So they asked me how you'll go about it, what will be the modalities of this entire project. So I told them that first of all, we'll look at the budget, and then the design of the houses, how many units do we need, where is the land, environmental clearance, etc., etc. So they asked me, how will you make the design? How will you make the design for these houses? So I said that we'll hire architects maybe, or from the government department we can have engineers who can design this for us. Now, they kept on prodding me for this question. How will they, what departments will you use? How will they make this design? But I was not able to take the cue. But ultimately, one of the panel members actually gave me a hint, and this told me that, don't you think that it will be better if people themselves design their houses, rather than having a top-down approach, or a structural engineer, or a government person or a private person do it for them? Don't you think that because you're making this scheme for the entire district, the geography will vary and everything, the kind of culture will vary? So don't you think that people are the best judge to make the houses they should live in? So I got the essence of the question, and then I accepted that, okay, yeah, probably, that is something that we should also do, because that they are very important stakeholders. Ultimately, the houses are for them. So if not directly designing the houses, at least some sort of consultation from them should be done. Even if we design it for them, we should probably take their views on them, on that particular design, and then proceed with the project. So just to give you a flavor of how panel members want you to be in the interview. And with the preparation, trust me, once you've reached that stage, you already have a very, very sound base of knowledge. The only thing that you need to present in the interview is the overall, like it is always said, that when you walk out of an interview room, the feeling that you leave the board members with, only that converts into marks. It's not the individual questions or the yeses and the nos, but after meeting with you, did they feel that they met a positive person? Did they feel that they met somebody who had some basic knowledge about things, who was sensitive to the vulnerable sections of the society? So these basic aspects, if you are able to display, and if you leave them with that feeling. So sometimes you see some interviews go on for 45 minutes, whereas some end in 20 minutes also. So why is that? Because some people are just boring. So the interview board the interview board is sitting there for months and months, not just conducting interview for UPSC, but NDA also, CTS also, all of these exams, IAS also. So if you're not interesting enough, if you're very serious and grumpy sort of a face, and then, so of course, they'll not be interested in asking you much. So you have to remain cheerful and at least display some sort of interesting characteristics. And some people, they just can't stop talking to. That's why their interview goes on for 45 minutes. Then they realize, okay, there are more candidates, so we have to send him out now, him or her out. So that happens. And it's only human because, the timing of your interview, if it is 1:30, then of course they'll be rushing for lunch, right? If it's right after lunch, they might be a little more amenable to your answers. So the hungrier a person gets, the less likely he is to agree with you. Okay. So these things are real because there is human intervention in the exam. There is subjectivity in the exam. And like being a long time veteran of this exam, I can definitely tell you that these things definitely matter. And this is the element of that 20% of luck that we talk about. This is the human element where on a given day of an exam, you could be sick. You could probably not perform well. You could have a family issue or like I said, interview timing. And the person who just came before you was absolutely brilliant. And then you go in and, things may go wrong and vice versa. So these things happen because it's only human to expect a certain level from somebody and be influenced by the immediate factors. Of course, they're very learned people, they're very experienced people, and they've been doing this for quite some time. But ultimately, they're human. So you have to give it to them about the human aspects also. For example, if I had scored 200 marks in my interview, I would have been rank 1. But that didn't happen because I scored 168 and fell short by quite a margin from rank 1. But because my main score was so good, owing to my GS and optional marks, that I was able to get a good rank. So overall, I would say, एक दो जो life lessons हैं after coming into service. See, your troubles are not going to reduce even after when you clear the exam. Don't think that things will get easy or life will be super chill, and that's not going to happen. You're always going to be stressed even after coming into service. Life is going to be the same. Of course, it's a good challenge that all of you have taken up. It's a great achievement if you do it. But if you're not able to do it, still, there are other avenues in life. And you should always, plan your time well. Do not unnecessarily waste time. Change your strategy if you have to. If you feel that things are not working, if this is not for you. And it's only natural. Like, for example, some of these painters, which we know as very famous ones, they didn't pick up a brush till they were 30 and they died at 37. So there is such an example. So the point is that it's okay. It's okay to fumble around a bit, find your groove and fail at things. So don't take life too seriously. Even after coming into service, you'll have plenty of troubles, plenty of headaches, cadres and then postings and managing spouse postings and a lot of things. So it's all the same, it's all the same. So don't think that, you'll be suddenly transported into a different world from this one. The world remains the same. The challenges keep coming up. So try and remain cheerful. Do not take yourself too seriously. The exam is important. Do your best, put in your best effort, give it your best shot, and, hope for the best. That's what I can say. And I want to wish all of you all the best for the upcoming exam if you're taking it this year or in the future. And I hope all of you clear it with flying colors in the shortest possible time. Thank you so much. And
So thank you, Anand. And I really like this thing you said, that in interview, what matters is how you are leaving the room. That was, I think, a very good line. And today, it's a very lucky day for me because I am sitting with one IAS officer and one IFS officer also. So Shripal Reddy, our old student, he paid a surprised visit, so I don't have a bouquet for you. But it's really an honor to be sitting with such officials here. And Shripal has secured 131 rank, is presently under secretary LAC division, and he had secured 317 marks in 2019. You were 2019. And Shripal has also mentored a lot of students here. And I don't think you may be knowing each other. So, so Shripal is from Andhra. And we do have a center there. We invited Shripal and he gave a very mesmerizing speech and techniques. So I think let's Anand relax and have a coffee. And because I think it's a rare occasion if we can have IAS, IFS together. So Shripal, I think these students would like to hear something from you also. Yeah.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for inviting me. And it is quite unplanned. And I was supposed to be here just to meet ma'am to exchange some notes after 2 years, but in a quite surprising way, meeting lots of fresh faces. It's always exciting, and normally life is I would say it comes back in a circle. I was also a student like you one day, maybe in 2016, maybe 2016, I suppose, just starting the preparation, and I just opened YouTube, and there was this talk by Anand Vardhan, rank 4. And I did note down good number of points from that and implemented them, and did succeed later on. So it's quite coincidental as well as fruitful that I'm in the presence of a esteemed senior. Because, for example, you might always think, what do these kind of talks lead to? What do these talks mean? Do they mean some successful aspirant coming back to the Mecca of UPSC and showing off here? It doesn't mean that. Normally, no one needs to come back again to Rajendra Nagar of all the places. But yeah, the expertise or the sharing of knowledge techniques, they do get passed from one year to the other, and they are quite helpful, and many of you will definitely take those points, will refine them and give it to the next batches who are going to write the exam. And coming to, since the talk is about interview, I'd like to just make 2-3 points, and I'll just ask you to visualize that room. What are you and what are the person sitting in front of you? You are more amateur, bundle of energy, packed with idealism, ready for life, who sat for ample of hours in 4 closed rooms while your friends are chilling in the bars of Bangalore. But you are there to learn something new, to make these productive years of your life fruitful by learning something new. On the other side of the table are maybe bureaucrats with 35-plus-year-old experience who have seen it all, maybe from Indira Gandhi to Narendra Modi. They have seen generations come and go, and even a single year in the service, whichever service it may be, it makes you totally different. It changes your perspective. So their perspective is totally different, while you are totally raw. And one thing you need to keep in mind is that how much soever you may try, you will not be as mature as them, or as maybe conventional as them, or as conservative as them. So don't ever try to match that. Don't ever try to come up with you might say it PC type answer, politically correct answer, or an answer which doesn't have a tint of madness in it, or tint of rawness in it. So bring to the table what you are. It's a personality test. And before going to personality test or before going to the exam, read the syllabus. So you have this good paragraph in UPSC which talks about personality test, and it has some pointers. Compassion to the poor, or it says it's not a test of knowledge but of a personality. Linger about that point for an hour. What does it mean? So what do they want from you? And there are many stories where people sat there for 20 minutes, might have answered 80% of the questions, said, I don't know, sir, humbly for some other questions, but did end up getting 190, 200 marks in the exam, in the interview exam. And there may be other people who may come across as arrogant, they know everything, they have an answer for every question, but they might end up with average 170 or sometimes below 152. So try looking at the interviews, I can say, for example, it is never there is never an objective criteria to mark a person, because sometimes once you clear the exam, you might look at interview marks of a person and you might wonder one day, like, how did one guy see one guy see something in him that he allocated, or that person allocated that person more than 200 marks. You might not see the same spark that interview people saw in that person. So it's totally subjective at one sense. But saying that, there are always, for example, I'll just give an example of Madhuri, who is my senior in foreign services. She's also a student of MAM with political science background. She got maybe 208 or something like that in interview. But if you talk to Madhuri for 10 minutes, you'll definitely gauge that she'll get more than 180 in an interview. She is such good a people's manager. She doesn't portray, or she doesn't put out her emotions bluntly. She has a quite nice diplomatic way of saying things, and she mixes up humor well. So everyone can't do that, but in your own skin, being in your own skin is the most important thing when it comes to interview. If I can share, I did score like 182 in my interview, and it was more or less, you need to play to the board as well, I think, sometimes. And you need to bring in, you need to gauge the mood of those people too. They'll be putting some weird faces. One tries to maybe bother you. Some person might be looking at his notes or something. He'll look as if he doesn't care if you came in or went out. But that's not the case normally. Everyone is there, sitting there just to judge you, or to find some aspects of your personality and check them if they suit to a career in civil services. So, having said these things, I would say we don't do enough homework before going into the interview. I think so. When it comes to mains, for example, 60% of your time in your total preparation life will be going towards reading GS 2 and 3. You will never bother to read GS 4 unless you cross prelims, and you will never bother to do CSAT even before prelims. So these are some things we do. Disproportionate amount of time goes towards some subjects which don't appear in the exam to that proportion, mostly GS 2 and 3. But when it comes to interview, people give 5 to 10 mock interviews depending on the case. They go back to those mock interviews and again before doing some homework, and they take the feedback from the person sitting in the panel too seriously. I would say once going to mock interviews should be only a way to acclimatizing yourself towards an environment like interview. And whichever, if some person is saying something putting in a hyperbole across the table, so bringing something out of the blue and saying something, so you need not take it seriously. And the bottom line, I would say, is that when it comes to UPSC, my hunch about UPSC, the thing I still feel about UPSC after after 2-3 years after clearing the exam, is that most of the times people bring out their personality not just in interview but in answers of mains as well. Try, for example, you might be reading op-eds in newspapers, right? Do you read it? You read it. And let us take the example of Ukraine and Russia. You might have read 4 or 5 op-eds, maybe one Raja Mohan's in Indian Express, definitely. So, but when it comes to the issue, core issue, everyone, when it comes to those op-eds, are they stating some facts or are they giving their opinions? They are putting their opinions on the paper. They are not just stating some random facts. If someone is stating some random facts, those facts might, from an Indian perspective, might be more or less the same. And you need not read 4 or 5 editorials to, or a newspaper itself might not give that much space for those facts that were already stated. So everyone is bringing something new onto the table. The interviewer might ask the same question 5 times in that day, but each answer should be different. In most cases, they might not be too. You might just state the facts and take a side and leave the room. Rather than doing that, like, try to explore it. Try to, like, as a prism splits white light into 7 colors, be a prism, and if an issue is thrown at you, try to split into different angles. Try to view in different angles and try to put your own opinion and your own belief system too. And that belief system most of the time should be moderate rather than a bit radical, because you are coming into a system that reflects the idea of continuity and change. There is a change, but there is a great amount of continuity too. I would say try to bring your own metal into the interview, not just the interview. I would say to PSIR, definitely PSIR, you should bring your own perspective. And when it comes to PSIR, I'll just give one, I'll just put one thought and I'll leave it there. Before writing the question, or like, again, I'll take the example of Ukraine and Russia. So what I see is, like, I'll just, whenever I check even the papers of some aspirants, like if someone forwards me an answer and asks me to check, those people directly write a introduction and they just start according to Raja Mohan. I'll say just leave the habit of writing according to. Like, before discussing the issue, don't just jump into giving definitions to your answer by borrowing some others' ideas. Those according to are meant to just give different sides of the argument rather than evading the core issue and jumping into that. So don't write according to in your, like, at least if it's a 20 marker, at least in the first 1.5 page, please don't write according to. Just try to discuss the issue. Bring in the static philosophers. For example, if you quote Mearsheimer, I wouldn't object to that. But if you bring Raja Mohan in second paragraph of your answer, then you are never going to score well. That is guaranteed. And I'll just leave with one last point. I think UPSC, 80% of UPSC is mastering the static part. Static part in the sense, the issues that were already, for example, the issues of yesterday. Maybe 20% of it is about the issues of today. Again, I'll take the issue of Russia and Ukraine. You can read 10 editorials today or 10 types of current affairs today, but the core issue stands with the fall of Soviet Union, 1, and 2, the 2008 Euro summit in Bucharest, which gave in principle approval for Ukraine's joining of Nato. So these two. So everything is played from then. So if you master these two static parts, they are more or less the static parts, if you consider. So most of the times, like the other thing people do is that they forget Lakshmikant once they are done with prelims. Again, coming back to the mains exam, most of your crux of your answer will be the static syllabus or your analysis of static syllabus. Only that 20-30%, maybe 20 to 30% will be the areas which you pick up from newspapers or pick up from everyday issues, and you just dovetail those issues into the main static answer you are writing. So try to master the core books, I would say. Try to master them. Like if someone makes a mistake, for example, लक्ष्मीकांत से अगर क्वेश्चन आया, आप गलती कर रहे हो, तो then it's no one can pardon you because it is just single book you need to master. लक्ष्मीकांत को master करने के लिए maybe 4 revisions are enough, I would say. So if you can, if your accuracy rate is 90% or 85%, if you can score 8 to 9 questions, maybe one question you might do it wrong or 2 questions, but 10 क्वेश्चन प्रीलिम्स में आया और 6 क्वेश्चन से आप सही कर रहे हो, 2 गलत कर रहे हो, 2 लीव कर रहे हो, then you are out. Then no amount of time on environment or current affairs will get you in, because that again requires tons of luck on your part to get in. So whichever is in your hand is the static part. Try to master it, try to analyze it, and put your own opinion into it, understand it, and try to write again and again. Write test series as many as you can. Try to reframe your answers. Go back and look at the toppers. For example, 2020 exam mein kaun, who was the person who wrote better answers. Try to borrow ideas and just create an answer of your own. Try to improvise it one by one. And I am just saying, like, if you can master the static part well, and if you can put a point across a point on paper, which in a way looks different from the other person, then most of the times you are in. That's it. And all the best to you. And the other thing I would say is that try to make your preparation more lively. Lively in the sense, put your own thought as well as your own style. Do experiments too, writing for good, flow charts ho sakta hai, tables, bar graphs, whichever thing you are thinking of. But those things are just addendums to your the answer which you write. They can never compensate for your lack of substance on the issue. So try to, I would say, like, focus on the core part or the static part well, and try to bring those current affairs and use it well, dovetail them well, and write a great answer. Thank you.
So, thank you, Shripal. And I know you have always been a very good speaker. Okay. So now I think we can open the session for the questions. And since both of them are here, so you can raise the questions, and you can also tell whom you want to address. So, fine. So we can start some questions. Yes. Do you have any questions, or should? Yeah. Okay.
Hello, sir. Hello, Anand, sir, and Shubhra, sir. Sir, my question is that I want some explanation about your journey of preparation in like situation what you went through, and across, and how you handle that situation and pressure, because as you explained that you once you gone to the CP and took the 25 round, so that thing are happening with us, I think so, most of the people who are 1.5 year preparing for. And approaches of answer writing, like what we should do, means everyone say that we should write the answer this way or that way. Many coaching centers are saying what means how we like Supal sir has told us that what type of reading we should do, that they are saying 4 or 5 reading. My capacity, I may know how many times I would read or something, so I get through the whole book, or same thing. So how we should read, how much concentration would be needed there, and detailing and answer writing detailing. Can you explain that, please?
I think a very relevant question you have asked. And one thing is a normal, because this exam is a very difficult exam. A lot of things are at stake. And obviously, this question keeps on coming. whether I will be able to clear or not, what will happen, how to maintain that motivation. And Anand has already told, go to the CP, and that is also one good way. But I think Anand, you can share more on that.
So again, I feel that see, dealing with failure. ठीक है, I just want to. ठीक है मैम, I'll sit down. हाँ ठीक है मैम. So see, dealing with failure, I personally feel that for all of us it is different. All of us deal with it differently also, based on our personalities. So some of us are overthinkers, obviously, because we think through every situation, and even when you have to make a phone call, you replay the entire conversation in your head and then make the phone call. Some people are like that, but some people will just make the phone call, right? Some people will not think too much about how the other person will interpret my. So ultimately it's also a part of your personality, how you're managing stress, how you're managing failure. But like I mentioned earlier, a very important aspect of life is not to take it too seriously. Again, that is something that I have learned over the years, and only after coming to the academy in 2017 was I actually able to shed off everything that was in my head, always past events that were going on, future anxieties that were there. Once you shed all of that and live in the moment, once you realize that life is not going to happen in the future sometime, it's happening to you, and it will happen to only you. You have to deal with it. So any amount of support that you can have, that's your luck. If your family is very good, you have a good friend circle, you're very lucky then, of course. But you have to deal with that pain, that anxiety, that grief for that brief moment. And like I said, give yourself some time. For each person it can vary, and make the important decisions after some time. Let the dust settle, let the fog clear up, and then you'll see clearly. Because once you're logical with your life, just like in the exam, then you'll be able to see the logical options. So I told you that I went to the private sector after writing my 4th mains, and I took my interview with the job itself. And after that, when the result was about to come, so that day I had again planned not to see the result, because last year I had to see the entire PDF and not find my name. So it was a very traumatic experience for me. And I never thought that a 200 KB PDF could traumatize me for life like that. But it happened. So then again, you have to deal with it. You have to move forward. There's no moving backwards in life. So by the grace of God and good luck, I did clear the exam, and somebody actually informed me that I cleared the exam. But in that moment, trust me, if I tell you the exact feeling that I had, it was not exuberance. It was just calmness. It was just something that, okay, this is something that I've been doing for so long. It's been 4 or 5 years, and now I've made it. But I didn't feel like, I've been propelled into the outer atmosphere or something. It was just calmness. It was satisfaction that, okay, my efforts have yielded results. So work for that feeling. Once you are like that, then nothing much affects you. After that, things are very, very smooth for you. Na haar mein, na jeet mein, that sort of a thing. If you are able to, develop that sort of a personality slowly with time, and eventually in life you will develop that. Life will teach you. But the sooner you learn, the better it is, I think. And of course, there are more lessons to be learned after you come into service, and the more amount of time you spend, the more number of people you interact with, you'll get their point of view. You'll become more flexible. You'll become open to others' opinions. Some people become more rigid with time. So ultimately, keep yourself open, not too serious. See, humor is a great way to go through life, let me tell you, because it's going to badger you every week or something. Even later on, you'll face challenges every time in your life. Always there will be something that you have to really handle and like put your brains into it, no matter who you are, no matter who the hell you are. So basically, try to develop that sort of a lightness. So I was reading this poem yesterday. I would just read it for all of you. It is by Aldous Huxley, and I found it very, very nice. So maybe you can take some, advice from it. It's dark because you're trying too hard. Lightly, child, lightly. Learn to do everything lightly. Yes, feel lightly, even though you're feeling deeply. Just lightly let things happen and lightly cope with them. So throw away your baggage and go forward. There are quicksands all about you. sucking at your feet, trying to suck you down into fear and self pity and despair. That's why you must walk so lightly. Lightly, my darling, on tiptoes and no luggage, not even a sponge bag, completely unencumbered. So, this is something I read yesterday and I thought I would share with you. So, try and develop this perspective and you'll be fine. Then nothing will affect you, I think. And for your second part, I think you can take it up.
Since I would say sir is much better placed to answer about GS and other things, but I'll just say something about PSAR when it comes to answer writing. Whenever you are looking at an issue, there are some things, some basics we miss out on. One is where to start it. Again, I'll take the same issue of Russia, Ukraine, because that's in my mind since maybe 2-3 weeks. So once you get to an issue, for example, if you are looking at an issue, you don't know where to start. What I used to do is that when you are new to the preparation, you go and start reading whichever you find in the newspaper. Then you go back to Wikipedia or whichever internet source you get, and you try to dig some history on that. Again, you'll be doing again, and you will find some unanswered questions. Again, you will be trying to do that. So it gets repetitive again and again. And at the end of 4-5 revisions or 4-5 readings of that issue, you are still unclear about the basis of that issue. So I'll say before going to an issue, and I have this technique. I used to have this technique. Please, I'll just share that with you. So there are two kinds of issues. One is a core issue. Two is a periphery issue. It is a periphery issue. Core issue is that issue on which you will find a question in UPSC exam. UPSC exam mein, if you take GS2 paper, 3 questions are on that IR part, institutions. So maybe 1 question on Panchayat Raj and local bodies, 1 question on that basic structure doctrine wala point pe. So more or less the paper is balanced in terms of the number of questions asked on the number of points. And those points are the core issues, I would say. Those points and their associated things. Maybe you will just find maybe 40 core issues for paper 2 in international, paper 2 of PSIR. Paper 2 instance, the paper part B of paper 2. So try to pick those core issues. Left-wing extremism is a core issue. And you can read about a core issue. Try to read about a core issue and try to make your own notes of the core issue. That core issue is not going to change if you are giving if you are giving this year or next year or after next year. In 2-3 years, that core issue is not going to change. You will be reading that same again and again. So try to find those core issues, and if you look at a topic, just categorize: is it a core issue or is it a periphery issue? Periphery issue will be an addendum, like you will just add it in your GS answer rather than writing about it completely. If you find an interesting fact about women, for example, women is a core issue, but you'll find a random fact or random article on International Women's Day on women. You need not treat it as a core issue. Just try to find 20 to 30 words which you are finding from that and add that into your main issue. And try to focus most of your time on core issues rather than these periphery issues. When you go to periphery issues, you will be reading hundreds of editorials every day. And I'll just make a confession. I never read newspaper in that 1.5 year of my UPSC preparation. Like, this is a mad thing to do, I would say. I wouldn't ask you to do that, but I'll tell you a bit elaborately. So whichever monthly issues at the end of the month, you will find 20, 30, 50, 80, 100 issues, whichever module you pick a single module, you will find those issues. And they are nicely sorted out. And more or less, if you are with a group, you are already knowing those current affairs. Although those people are reading and they are putting it in your ears in one way or the other, and you are also loosely aware of them. Then go back and do reverse engineering. Take that one issue, maybe first issue ek aayega, go to that issue, try to type those keyword Russia, Ukraine, Indian Express at the end of that month. You just type, you will have 10 to 15 articles. Read 2-3 articles, and after that, you will understand the issue more or less. you'll understand the issue more or less. So this can be one way, but I'll not ask everyone to stop reading newspaper. Please don't do that. Uh, I- as said, that is also an important thing. So again, I'll just, before, as I said, like I just want to mention that try to organize issues into core as well as periphery issue, and try to master the core issue, and again go back to those basic books again and again. If you are reading Lakshmikant for polity, Lakshmikant can be used in PSIR optional as well. Don't neglect Lakshmikant ki ho gaya prelims, ab Lakshmikant mein nikalunga hi nahi. Don't do that mistake, because more or less again and again our polity is built on as a constitution which changes barely in Indian constitution, which changes barely. So if you can master that book very well, that's enough. And again, I just lost myself. Coming back to the issue of answer writing, try to fix those bases which you are not going to change. In the sense, for example, if you start with some bases, some historical points which you start with, don't go back to Wikipedia again and again and don't dig deeper. Like try to cover some bases कि कहाँ शुरू हुआ इसका, where did it start, आज का status क्या है, that's it. Like if you can just connect that, and again you will find this Feynman technique on YouTube, no? I think some of you must be aware of it. Like try to explain that issue to someone, or use a board to map that issue and again and close it for God's sake. Like एक बार close किया ना, then open it again when you are doing revision. Again when you find normal कि एक आज op-ed देखा मैंने newspaper में, तो again फिर से मत जाओ, because you are wasting your time. Because nothing, after some time nothing adds to your value. You just have that 7 to 10 minute window to write that answer. So like think from an examiner's perspective. Again वही क्वेश्चंस आएगा, कितना भी फैंसी पढ़ लो, यूपीएससी वही नॉर्मल क्वेश्चंस ही पूछेगा. They'll ask those normal questions, 1-2 out of the blue questions to make you uncomfortable. That's it. Otherwise, like जो core होता है bullet points syllabus में, उसी पे questions आएगा. All questions सीधा उसी पे आएगा, and उसका सबका substance तो core books में ही मिलेगा. And answer writing, when it comes to answer writing, I don't think like I am the right person to do it. To answer it, sir will be the right person to do it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, sorry to bother you. I have two more questions. Sir, what was your experience in the job till now, and how you both handle political pressure on situation on the ground, sir?
I think we can leave that question. That is, देखो पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर, जॉब प्रेशर, फैमिली, वो तो प्रेशर डील करने के टेक्निक्स हैं, वो कहीं भी होगा. सेम टेक्निक्स विल बी देयर. ठीक है, तो वो अगर आप एग्जाम का प्रेशर डील कर लोगे तो वो भी डील कर लोगे. तो उसमें ऐसा कोई अलग से आई डोंट थिंक बहुत बड़ी चीज़ है. अब प्रिपरेशन रिलेटेड या और कोई क्वेश्चन? यस,
मेरा क्वेश्चन आनंद सर से है. सर, इंजीनियरिंग बैकग्राउंड होने के बावजूद आपका PSIR की तरफ क्या क्या चैलेंजेस हुए सर आपके, और उसको कैसे टैकल किया सर आपने? और सर, मैम का जब नोट्स पढ़ते थे, या आप डायरेक्ट सिर्फ थॉरली पढ़ते थे, या आपकी डे वन राइटिंग करते थे?
लास्ट में नहीं, सेकंड पार्ट क्या?
मैम का जब नोट्स पढ़ते थे सर, तो आप मैम का जब नोट्स पढ़ते थे आप, तो आप थॉरली पढ़ते थे या डे वन से राइटिंग करने लगे थे सर आप?
अच्छा, राइटिंग की बात आप पूछ रहे हैं, ठीक है. पहला क्वेश्चन क्या था, सॉरी? अच्छा, करेक्ट, ठीक है. देखिए, अगर आप प्रैक्टिकली बात करें तो टेकिंग इंजीनियरिंग ऑप्शनल is a little difficult for this exam for very simple reasons. Number one is syllabus is very vast. So even if you are from an engineering background, taking that optional is very difficult. So there is a fixed set of bouquet of optionals you usually select from, which is anthropology, sociology, pub-ed, political science, geography. These 4-5 are the ones you would normally select unless you have an inclination towards, let's say, some literature subjects or something. So I think that selecting an optional is a very, very important exercise. In my case, it was completely like I didn't give any thought to it during selecting public administration, because I didn't plan out my strategy or take any coaching, any guidance, didn't write any test series, just randomly started reading it randomly. So the reason for my performance in PubAd was because my strategy was wrong. It was not because PubAd is bad. It was because I could not do well in PubAd. Even in the year that I cleared, there were sufficient number of toppers as well as overall number of people who cleared from PubAd. So ultimately, आपका strategy matters, and selecting something is also a matter of interest. Like after PubAd, a very very logical thing for me was to go for political science, because somewhere there is some overlap. I was decently confident with international relations also. So it depends on you. Like I said, like this is not a very good model that you prepare PubAd for 3 years and then go for pol science. That's not a great model. But exercise due diligence while selecting your optional. And if you select any of these, you have certain amount of interest, because you have to stay with it for some time, at least for a year and a half. You have to stay with that subject, and you have to master it to some extent. Like GS, you can still have an overall command of GS, but optional you have to have some depth of knowledge, because you will also be asked in the interview. So accordingly select your optional, and any of these options, like I said, depending on your interest also, you can do it. And your second question was about? Okay, so notes, initially when I had taken, when the classes had not started, so that time, I was just reading the notes. Uske baad, since I was a classroom student also, I used to come every day. And the test series, in fact, I started when the mains crash course starts, I think near probably September, October, in that year it started. So I took to the writing part after that only, after having some basic background knowledge and then taking some classes. Only then I came to answer writing. And that year I did not write GS answers, because I had written last year and then I had very little time. So I divided my time, because it was only 3 months. I divided and devoted a lot of time to political science, because it was new for me. So I, managed my time accordingly, because I was confident with GS. But again, it depends on you. What is your level of preparation, and how much time you should devote to each subject.
So,
Yes. I in fact referred to Haywood also, and Rajiv Bhargav also. I read Elephant Dances, Can the Elephant Dance also, and I made notes from that book also, because, like I said, it was a subject of my interest, so I was able to do it. Otherwise, probably in that frame of time, I would not have been able to do it. But I did refer those books, and they are very very interesting books, and I was able to use the content also, and I referred to some websites which I refer to even today, like for example the Guardian and Project Syndicate. So I had enough resources in political science also. I referred a bouquet of resources, not just one. About the hobby part you asked, in the DAF, I think it is good to mention at least one hobby, not to mention too many, because it is not possible to have too many hobbies, and it straight away looks fake if you write too many things there. Write one, manage that well. Like for example, I had written tennis analytics, so it was something quite different. It was not just tennis, it was about the statistics that are derived out of tennis. And because I've been following it for 10 years or so, so I'm very very aware of how things work. For example, if there is a match between two players, so what is that one metric which, if this player completes, he'll win the match? For example, defending the second serve more than 45%, then he'll win the match. So that I had put as my hobby, as tennis analytics. So it can be something mainstream also, of course, like gardening or writing or listening to music. But prepare that part well. Do not write too many, because like I said, it's practically not possible to have too many hobbies. If you're pursuing one also, that's also good enough. Okay.
sirs, in interview or even in mains, when we talk about giving an answer which is mature and responsible, and as a civil servant, could you just give an example when you're talking, like even if somebody asks you a tricky question or a loaded question of any sort, you convey the answer without actually giving a extreme stand, but doing justice to it. So what mindset would you have to tackle the interview entirely
I think
with that?
you can give us a question and we can try probably. I mean, if
I'm
you can
not-
think of something.
No, I'm not. UK and Russia or whatever. Like, I'm not in a place to give a question. Sorry.
Okay, so probably like let us try to frame a question there that should India actually in the UN or on the international forum, should India express its displeasure with what Russia is doing in Ukraine? For example, this is the question: should India express its displeasure? Right. So you want to take it up? I think you're better placed. You're better placed to do this. I want to give you the because it's your favorite subject, so I thought you would like to.
I'll just first say that mature answer, like, Arey, yaar, you are just 23, 24, 25. You can't be, I said that in my talk itself. You can't beat them on maturity. You'll never beat those guys sitting on the other side on maturity. And secondly, like, should you be mature only if you are a civil servant? Can't you be mature not being a civil servant? In most cases, there are a good number of citizens who are vigilant and more mature than sitting civil servants. That's so, like, don't think that you are already in the job. You are not in the job, and when you are in the job, those shoes are going to be totally different than that you are imagining today. Once आप डीएम बन जाओगे या कोई भी सर्विस में जो भी आपने चुन लिया बन जाओगे, the way you look at that job is totally different, will be totally different from the way you are looking at that job today. So, and when it comes to the question of Russia and Ukraine, and any question, I'll just say first, try to state your opinion or your answer or a short summary of your answer in the first sentence itself, and keep them waiting for the next. For example, you can just say bluntly, say no. For example, if you say on the resolution sponsored by United States, should India have voted with them, or should India have voted with those 135 odd countries or 145 countries which voted against Russia in the General Assembly? The better thing is that I took this interview cues from ma'am itself. For example, there are some quotes in ma'am's पहले आंसर इंट्रोडक्शन में ही एक पंच लाइन होता है. In those days, I remember she used to have this punchline on Trump's foreign policy. Trump's foreign policy is a curious mixture of trade, threat, Twitter, and tariff. ऐसा कुछ होता था. Nice punchline. So if you have a punchline, for example, आपको ट्रम्प से ऊपर आप तो है ही नहीं, but if question आया तो if you have a punchline, PSIR से एक punchline निकाला तो you can just put it that on. लाइक ऐसा नहीं है कि मगअप करके बोल दिया, ऐसा मत बोलना, लाइक बट थोड़ा लाइवली में यू कैन से. एंड व्हेन इट कम्स टू दिस दिस पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन ऑफ रशिया यूक्रेन, you just start with this point that there are no permanent enemies or permanent friends in international relations. There are only permanent interests, and in our we will do anything in our interest. One, and go to the situation. Situation क्या है? The situation is that कोई भी कुछ भी बोलो. If tomorrow, I'll just give don't say this in the, not to say this in the exam, but if tomorrow someone is building a like good military base in Maldives, वो तो हो ही रहा है जो भी जहाँ पे build हो रहा है, but like will we not worry? One. And secondly, situation, before understanding a situation, what separates India and China? The Himalayas, there is a natural boundary which separates India. So what separates Ukraine and Russia? Is there any natural barrier that separates Ukraine and Russia? It doesn't separate. So access towards Ukraine is always an access to Russia. And I'll just ask this out of curiosity, since all of you are PSIR students, no? How many of you have seen that Mearsheimer's 1 hour lecture in YouTube? Has anyone seen? You saw. So in that lecture, he says that security of Europe dekho, continuous mein, you can put this, the security of Europe, the security architecture of Europe is such a way that France, Germany, Poland, Ukraine and Russia, these are the northern European plains. बीच में हल्का एक river आएगा, यही आएगा, उससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं होगा. So NATO stationing in itself, NATO station in Russia, in Ukraine, if they become a member, is itself a security threat to Russia. That again doesn't mean that they will have to invade another sovereign country by violating the international law. And coming to India's part, sir, you can say we have taken our own, we have taken the best way, I will say, by siding with our all weather ally Russia, by abstaining in that. Abstention in a way is that we have done enough. But if you look at the statement we released after that, we balanced it out by, if you read that statement, it is very much showing our displeasure towards Russia that you have violated one of the core themes of concepts of international relations, which is sovereignty. You can just say this, and you said you can defend India's answer in this way. Just state the fact, state some facts, analyze it, or use. I'll say, like, if you are getting some punchline in PSIR, take it that to interview as well.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Hello, sirs. So my question is to Anand, sir.
थोड़ा mic ठीक से so that it is audible. हाँ.
Hello, is it audible now? Yeah. My question is to Anand, sir. Sir, how to extract better from the newspaper over a period of time to be able to observe a change in the way you analyze the newspaper on day 100 or day 365? So how to extract better?
Okay, so I will answer the newspaper question. Please sit down. Newspaper question in totality. In my experience, when I didn't used to get enough time for the newspaper, I used to just read the op-ed part of it. So usually any issue which is of any sort of importance will sooner or later appear in that section, number one. Number two is how to extract the relevant part of it. Like I said earlier, some things just take time. So once you are apprised of the entire syllabus, you have a general idea of what are the topics in GS 2 and 3 especially, because they are relevant from the point of view of current affairs. So once you're aware of the basic bullet points of your subject and your syllabus, then you start looking at the newspaper from that point of view slowly on. So if you're reading the op-ed, for example, if you're following the Hindu, then there are 5 articles. Overall, I think 5 articles where anything of importance is mentioned. So even if you're able to go through those 5 and prepare notes, so that was my style. I used to write something down, a shortened version of it in a digital platform, so that I could revise it later. Because like I said, ultimately, if your effort does not ensure that you can reproduce it in the exam, it is going to be useless. So make sure that, and you can never go back to newspapers. It is very difficult to even read 10 days worth of newspaper at one go. So if you think that you'll just keep postponing and one day take all of that, it's very difficult. So try and be regular. It's okay if you miss something. Then you can probably supplement it with the monthly magazines and everything. But the knowledge and the precision with which you extract from the newspaper will develop over time, and it will happen based on the syllabus itself. So, and the kind of questions that have been asked, so you'll understand what issues are relevant. For example, the Uniform Civil Code, for example. So whatever is in news currently, it has come recently into news because of Uttarakhand talking about it. So that becomes a topic of interest, and then you go back to it, and Article 44 about the Constitution, where it is mentioned, and then the background to it, and what are the efforts that have been made, what are the committees that may have suggested it. So once you read the newspapers, you will find a lot of this ready-made information already in those articles. So you can at least keep them when in your notes, so that, and add to it later on. So maybe 5 days later, if another article appears on the same topic, you can extract from there and add to the same topic. So usually some people do it very systematically. They keep it topic wise or GS 2, 3 wise at least. But I used to do it randomly. But you can be systematic about it and keep adding to individual topics as you go along. So that will help you definitely. So note making, आपने जो पूछा, I think it's very important according to me, because it's very difficult to recollect and recall newspapers worth of 1 or 1.5 years unless you have some sort of revision technique to go back to it. So making notes ensures that it's in your own handwriting, own words. So it's very easy to go back to it. Even during the mains exam, between 2 papers, papers when you'll have 1 or 2 hours, and just to build your confidence, you have to quickly go through things. So that will come in very handy. You of course cannot carry all the newspapers, but if you have a notebook, then you can go through that in that short period of time, and it will boost your confidence also to sit for the next paper, because everyone will be studying. In mains also everyone is studying, even in those 2 hours. So you cannot keep sitting idle. That will kind of you'll feel like you're out of the competition. So you have to study something there also. So you just revise the more relevant aspects, and this will help. This will help in that crucial 2 hours of gap that you have during the mains exam, and probably the next day also. Let's say GS1 and 2 aaj ho gaya, so tomorrow if you have 3, so you just have the evening and the night to go through the important things. So notes will come in handy at that point.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. My question is, in UPSC, we have to study so many subjects, and not every subject is as interesting as the others. So how to make those subjects who are boring, how to make
Okay,
them
so I'll
interesting?
just share my experience with geography. That is my personal experience. It can vary from person to person. So geography is something that I didn't used to like a lot, and then even after reading a lot, I was not able to develop a lot of interest and not regularly study it. So what I started doing is I started solving a lot of test papers for mains. Started doing the preparation the reverse manner. I started solving questions, and I just kept all of those test papers before the mains, and I revised only the test papers. So it was easier to kind of look at. And geography is something, when you talk about mains, so in the GS1 portion, there's only limited set of questions, and they've actually repeated it also over the last 5-7 years, because there's just a limited set of topics that they can ask from in geography. So I sort of reverse prepared geography like that. So of course there will be subjects that you will not like, and you'll like to spend lesser time on, but you can take up in your schedule when you're feeling fresher, probably in the morning, and the subjects that you do like, you can actually take it after the evening when you're tired, or after your classes when you're not feeling so fresh. But those are difficult things you have to do, because you cannot leave any subject, and especially in the prelims, if the weightage of that subject is very high, then you will suffer. You'll not be able to clear the prelims. So you cannot leave culture, you cannot leave geography. You have to devote equal attention to all, but just manage it according to the schedule that you have made it.
So my question is that, like in my case, if art and culture and science and tech part of mains and prelims is left, and 2 months are left for prelims now, and you have to manage the task of covering CSAT also, and all the other part that you have done, like polity or other task, history, medieval history, something like that. So how to approach to that we can extract what should be the main strategy for current 2 months of in art and culture and science and tech, that we can manage somehow prelims, and then how we can cover in that 2.5 months.
Is that your current situation now, right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So I wanted to get that right.
Okay. So again, there cannot be a set strategy. There cannot be a set answer to this. But I think that you would have gone through at least certain sources in art and culture, whatever NCRT probably, or some other textbook that you might have gone through. At least some level of knowledge you would have acquired there. What you can do is you can devote probably a week's time to only these 2 subjects. I think that will help you, because what will happen is, then after 1 week, you will start feeling that you are missing out on the other subjects. Then you will also go back to that. So in this 1 week of preparation, whatever already done, that part you can revise. And of course, you can cover some other portions. See, it is very memory intensive, art and culture especially. A lot of things that you have to remember. So again, you can use note making techniques at least to be able to recollect it at that point just before the prelims. Unless you are able to recollect it, it'll be no use again reading all of it. So try and keep short notes of it, so that after that week also, when you're reading other subjects, in the gaps you can probably go back to those notes and again prepare that subject. So, but again, it's a difficult task, but don't worry too much about it. Also, do not forego the rest of your preparation. If you're not able to manage everything, it's still fine. I mean, you should go to the exam confidently and do your best, because even the people who would have read everything, they might not be able to solve those questions. So it's okay.
And sir, I have not even started doing answer writing also. So how to approach in that?
That's okay. That's okay. Right after prelims, you can do that. There is still time after prelims and before mains where you can practice answer writing. So even if you've not done it, it's okay, because right after prelims, there will be that period when you'll be waiting for the results. So that time you can probably strengthen your static portion. And once the results are out, right after that, you can start your mains answer writing practice.
And sir, one more question regarding India and Russia relations, that and related to Ukraine also, that why Russia is more concerned about Ukraine than other parts like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and other parts, and more focused on Ukraine part only. Is it because it's linked to Black Sea?
In my opinion, of course, the factual part of it there can be more aspects to it. But in my opinion, then this is more about the breaking point. So if you look at like it was being talked about earlier, if you look at the map of Europe and the eastward expansion of NATO in the last 20 years, especially. So these countries that you talk about, they acceded to NATO probably in 2000s, probably 2004, 8, and these years, right? And now when you look at the map, and if you actually color these countries and see to what extent NATO has expanded, probably the only ground left, the middle ground, the no man's land left, is Ukraine. So probably it's also about the breaking point, like why it was not reacted to earlier. And then it's also about leadership. What I feel is, after a certain amount of time that you spend in power, the way you look at things also changes. So when you are 4 years as president, it's different, and when you're 20 years as president, things may be different. So again, there can be more aspects to it, but I feel that it's about how Russia feels threatened, that this probably is the last post that it has to defend before it's completely within the reach of NATO. So I think
And
that
sir,
part.
one more aspect of rupee and ruble system that is there in case of conversation between India and Russia. So how can we link this topic to multidimensional aspects?
I mean, of course, you can talk about the historical relations and the current context and how the dependency, the import dependency that's there on Russia, and in the future, how we have to actually, protect our interests with respect to an old-time friend, and again balance your interests with the US. So that is the main challenge. Ultimately, that is the main challenge. The important details of it can keep changing and varying, but the main part of it is balancing these two nations, because we are under a lot of stress from the other side, let's say from the US, to actually issue a negative comment on this entire issue. But then, like it has been said, that interests are permanent, and what we'll do is in our own national interest, right? Okay, anything else regarding the preparation? 1 or 2 questions I think we can take.
Last 1 or 2 questions and then we'll finish.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I am preparing for 2023, sir. Sir, as you talked about note making from the newspapers, so I just wanted to ask if we need to make the notes from prelims perspective also. For example, sir, there is some species in news, so or just from the mains perspective, like so if we find some innovative points, so according to the topic in the syllabus, we can just write them there, or the prelim specific facts also, sir. That's
एक दो क्वेश्चन और बता दो, शायद कंबाइंडली आंसर हो जाएंगे.
मैम मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि लाइक मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि लाइक मैम भी बताती कि पीएसआईआर जो है उसकी एक लैंग्वेज है, पीएसआईआर सब्जेक्ट की एक लैंग्वेज है, कीवर्ड्स एंड ऑल दोस थिंग्स, एंड पीएसआईआर का जब आंसर भी एक भी पढ़ते हैं तो पूरा थॉट्स एक कलेक्ट करना एंड फिर राइटिंग दोज ऑन पेपर, एंड सर हाउ टू डेवलप दिस क्वालिटी की लाइक सो मेनी थॉट्स एंड देन राइटिंग दोज ऑन पेपर, इट्स अबाउट इट.
अच्छा, तो पीएसआईआर का चैलेंज है कि कैसे उसकी लैंग्वेज को एडॉप्ट किया जाए और जो मल्टीपल थिंकर्स हैं उनमें कैसे डिफरेंस, मतलब देखो जो जब आप फर्स्ट टाइम पढ़ोगे तो आपको वो कंफ्यूजिंग लगता है क्योंकि इट इज़ अ फर्स्ट टाइम, but later on if you will have a sharp logical abilities to distinguish that and make some points like I always tell, for example Machiavelli remember by this point, Hobbes की ये खास बात है, तो आपको अपना कोई तरीका ढूंढना पड़ता है आइडेंटिफाई करने का और रिलेट करने का। तो पहली बार मतलब वही है, एज आनंद सेड, पेशेंस इज इम्पॉर्टेंट एंड इट इज़ अ कंटिन्यूअस प्रोसेस। और आज जो आपका फील है वो थोड़े दिन बाद नहीं होगा, क्योंकि एक और पॉल साइंस में भी ये भी है कि पूरा जब एक सिलेबस खत्म हो जाता है तब कहाँ पे क्या पीसेस हैं वो उसकी एक पिक्चर बनती है। तो लेट इट हैपन, जस्ट कीप ऑन गेटिंग योर सेल्फ, just getting yourself introduced to the language, और वो ज़बरदस्ती कुछ मत करो, वो अपने आप कई बार सुन करके वो डेवलप होगी, रिवीजन से डेवलप होगी, टेस्ट लिखने के बाद डेवलप होगी। और श्रीपाल कुछ यू वांट टू ऐड?
I'll just say one thing when it comes to PSIR. You can take off your free time rather than, for example, there are lots of movies, maybe 30 plus movies, where you can understand Nuremberg Trails एक movie है. You will understand what Berlin blockade is rather than reading a book. एक बार 2 घंटे मूवी देखना लीजर जो टाइम होता है, यूज इट इन दैट वे. मे बी लास्ट वीक टू नाइट विद जॉन एलुवर आता है, like you can 15-20 minutes video hota hai. It is funny as well as informative in a way, and there are lots of these kind of things. For example, rather than getting introduced to an issue through a book, try to get introduced to that issue with a video or a book or video or a movie or some documentary. So in a way you are relaxed while getting introduced to that thing, and you'll more or less understand the big picture or bit jargon. Then the academic part can follow later. Like if you are a first timer कि अभी शुरू कर रहे हो, 2023 में लिख रहे हो, then evening hours you have a lot of time. Rather than looking at some movie series या we try to prioritize this kind of entertainment stream, and that will help you in the exam as well.
Some question in personality test create dilemma on the morality versus pragmatism. How to deal this type of questions? Morality versus pragmatism.
I think you should go for morality in the interview and not pragmatism, because so as we were discussing earlier, there is a certain amount of rawness that is expected of you. It's not expected that you take a very, very mature stand, and a lot of the issues that might be raised to you, they have anyway not been solved for 75 years. So it's not like you can solve them with an answer. But what you can actually do is wherever, so morality is, you have to understand that it is non-negotiable. Morality is not something that you can negotiate with. You cannot say that this thing is wrong, but let's do it because it is practical. That you cannot say it now, you cannot say it ever. So do not compromise on that aspect. As far as the practicality part of it is concerned, once you are in the job, you'll realize that certain concessions, like I'll give you an example. For example, in the disaster fund of the state, in the SDRF fund of the state, there are certain provisions as to whom we can actually benefit from this fund. And there are very specific types of accidents for which we can give the relief. Now, for example, this example was told to us in the academy only. So, for example, there was this lady who was totally destitute and no one in her family, and she was totally deserving of getting some sort of government help. So, she didn't have a government house because she didn't own any land and all of that. So, one of the provisions in the disaster thing is if there's very heavy rainfall and the house falls down, then you get some sort of compensation. So some officers have actually, you can say, innovatively interpreted this provision and made sure that the house falls so that she gets the benefit. So it's in the best interest. It's not immoral to do this because you know that the person is deserving of this government help. So whenever, for example, if there is a particular day on which a lot of rainfall has actually happened, but the house has not actually fallen down, only a part of it has fallen down, for example. So you can sort of make that concession. So morality can be relaxed to only this extent, in my opinion, and it's non-negotiable. Otherwise, it can only be relaxed to the extent where it benefits somebody needy and somebody who actually deserves that sort of government help. So this is a very good example to tell you how to balance it. But in the interview, when the question is very clear, the answer should be very clear that you cannot compromise with morality at all. So we'll take one more question, last question. Anyone? I devoted like more than 4 years. PSIR, though I had less time, of course. I had 4 months, but around 4 months, I think I was able to cover everything because the second paper was also very, very familiar to me, right? And one last question, which you can answer. Yeah, please.
You do it, sir.
Okay, history, modern history, Bipin Chandra was my strategy, in short. And modern history mein kya hai ki in the mains exam, there will be certain questions which are not very difficult. As we were talking about, they're not totally out of the blue. Whenever there will be a question from modern history, it's going to be very, very straightforward. So if you have read Bipin Chandra, I read that book, I think, 14 times or something. And in this 4 years, not at one go, but you have to pick it up again because it's like a story. It's interesting also. It's not divided into chapters and it's not like a textbook. It's like a regular reading material. So it's also possible to do that thing. So I was at one point aware of what page had what because I had read it so many times. But, that sort of gives you a philosophical base also rather than just the factual things. So when you read Spectrum, for example, you do get all the tribal revolts and all the resolutions that were passed and all the acts, everything. So the factual things you can get from Spectrum, but you need to develop a sense, a background of how things were and what were the ideologies behind various policies that the Congress was pursuing at that time, and when it formed government in the states, what were the steps that were taken. So the logic behind all of that, and at the end of the freedom struggle, the ideals that were actually enshrined in the constitution. So it gives you a good background and a lot of continuity. So Bipin Chandra, I feel that is a very good source for the mains exam, history section especially.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. Sir,
Where are you? Okay.
Sir, I wanted to ask one thing regarding the answer writing practices. Sir, when we take PSIR as our optional, our answer approach has to be a bit philosophical. It has the language has to be fluid. But when, on the other hand, when we have to write the general studies questions, the approach has to be different, and the flow of the answer has to be different. The language has to be a bit different. So how we have to manage both? Because in my case, I have a problem of mixing both, because while I write the PSIR questions for practices and all, I have a different approach to it and I mix it with the general studies as well. So most of the times the basic essence of the question is lost because of the language distinction between both of them.
Okay. So I think this is a very good question, and because anyone who studies PSIR faces this challenge in GS2, how to write a GS answer and a PSIR answer. Again, I think it's not very, very possible to clearly segregate this part, but once you're reading PSIR, you're certainly, your knowledge in that subject is at a depth more than most aspirants would be in GS2. So I think that when you're writing a GS2 answer, you should stick to the things that are, for example, Lakshmikant, like we were talking about, that is the base of the framework of the entire paper. So, stick to things that are relevant from the point of view of the question. Like you said, if you're diverging away from the question during writing, because, you know so many things, so you're tempted to write so many things. That also happens. So, because your depth of knowledge is greater in that field, so try and read the question again after writing every 2 lines. Just try to stick to the requirement of the question, because only 2 pages and only 12 minutes is allotted to you, no matter what the question is. So unless you address the requirement of the question, you will get lesser marks. So as long as you're doing that, even if you're quoting somebody there like a thinker or a philosopher or a modern day columnist, that's okay. But you should address the requirement of the question. In GS2 also, if you write something from Raja Mohan, it will not be too much for somebody who is checking. He'll understand what you're trying to say, but provided that you have addressed that thing. Now this problem will not arise in PSIR because anyway, you have that depth of knowledge, and the questions are also framed in a manner which you have to write about international politics, for example. You have to write about the theories, you have to give it a background, historical background between the two countries or the current scenario and everything. So in PSIR, you will not face the challenge. Challenge is greater for GS2, and for that, you can use this technique of going back to the question and limiting yourself to the requirement of the question.
Want to add that don't do what you want to do what is expected. Fine. So every question has a specific answer. What happens, we come under the influence of our ideas. So this is something that has to be controlled. तो वो करना है जो डिमांड कर रहा है. क्वेश्चन अपने आप में काफी प्रिसाइज होते हैं जीएस के, तो स्कोप होता ही नहीं. आई डोंट फील कि स्कोप है. सो don't do what you like to do. Do what is expected to be done. If you will keep this in mind, then also things will become easier, I believe. Fine. So I think we will have to stop this wonderful session. And thank you, both of you. And thank you for all the participants. And it was very, very interesting, and I really enjoyed the session. And I believe next year, many from you, we will get an opportunity to invite and have many more such talks with many new faces. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Shripal. Thank you, Anand.